What do most Fortune 500 executives have in common? They learned important lessons on the fields and courts of their high school and collegiate sports teams. This is true for both men and women. Ernst & Young found that a whopping 94% of women holding a C-suite position played sports. Their wins and losses shaped their habits and who they would become. Join me on my journey to sit with some of the brightest executives in the world as we discuss how sports shape their professional trajectory. In partnership with Chief Executive Magazine, the voice of America's CEO community. I'm your host, Don Yeager, and this is Corporate Competitor Podcast. This week, we continue our celebration of John Maxwell's announcement that he is adding a league of extraordinary leaders into his larger team. Today, we do so with the incredible Valerie Burton. Valerie is known as America's life coach. She appears regularly on the Today Show and Dr. Oz, teaching resilience and courage. Valerie has written more than a dozen books, and I am excited to discuss how athletics shaped her leadership.
How will I need to grow in order to get to my most meaningful goal? We know what steps to take. Just take weight loss, eat healthier, or move more, or a combination of the two. The question is, why aren't you eating healthier? Why aren't you moving more? Right? What happens when it's time to make that choice that would be healthier? That's that area of growth. So just asking yourself, what is my growth gap? Where do I need to grow?
Valerie, thanks for joining us.
Oh, thank you for having me, Don. I'm excited about this.
I love getting ready to work with you on this because there are just so many lessons I learned. But one thing that really is so important to begin with is that in 2021, our mutual friend, John Maxwell, made a major announcement. He shared that he's making some shifts in his business, which has largely been built on his persona. And he's going to add some new voices to his team that are aligned around the philosophy of the Maxwell organization. He dubbed these 5 new voices the League of Extraordinary Leaders, and you are one of the rock stars.
Oh my goodness, what an honor, because I was reading John's books before I wrote my first book, which is more than 20 years ago, and have had the privilege and joy of doing things with the John Maxwell organization here and there over the last 16 or 17 years. This is completely different. I love John's passion for leaving a legacy, building people. And like you said, it's aligned. You know, what I do and what he has done are so well aligned, but I am just overjoyed and excited to work with him and you and the others that are a part of this League of Extraordinary Leaders. I feel like a superhero.
I know, exactly. I just want to see what cape you would choose. But so I'd love to ask, how did it hit you when someone that you admire and that you'd been following throws his arm around you and says, would you become part of this? How did that hit you?
My first thought was, this is divinely orchestrated. There are opportunities in my life in particular that I was prepared for, but never could have made happen. Things that just dropped in my lap where I go, wow, I didn't even know this was an opportunity. For me, it was a prayer. It was a prayer of gratitude as a reaction. Also, I just admire him so much, his integrity, his kindness, how strategic and consistent he is. And a part of that is because his people.
Right.
Like I said, I've worked doing various things with John Maxwell's team since 2005, I think, is the first time I did one of their events. Every person I've ever been involved with within his organization reflect the principles that he teaches. And that has not wavered, not once. That speaks volumes about who he is as a person and who he attracts.
It's an exciting time, and I can't wait to see where we go from here. But on the day of the announcement, you took the stage at John's Live to Lead, his Super Bowl event. and delivered what I thought was just such a powerhouse speech. Like I was riveted. You were teaching us to talk to ourselves as we talk to others.
Yes.
I love this phrase that you had. I scribbled it down. If your best friend went through your biggest challenge, how would you treat them and what would you say? Walk me through how you learned that all important lesson.
It really is self-compassion. My background is in applied positive psychology, so I'm always curious about what research teaches us about personal growth and how to live in our purpose and how to get unstuck when fear pops up and threatens to keep us from what we need to do. The work of Dr. Kristen Neff around self compassion really struck me and always strikes me as really powerful for several reasons. One, a lot of us beat ourselves up too much. When I wrote Let Go of the Guilt, that was a big piece of why I wrote it is so many people have this sense of false guilt that they've done something wrong, that they're doing something wrong. And their answer to that is to beat themselves up for not being perfect, for not doing things exactly right, whatever you deem right to be. And one of the answers is to just be kind to yourself. The people that we love, we're kind to when they mess up or they make a mistake or things don't go perfectly. We don't beat them up. We, in many ways, try to set them straight by saying, wait a minute, you're being too hard on yourself, reminding them of what they do well. Too often, we don't do that for ourselves. That's why that question is so very powerful.
Wow. I'd love to go back to your childhood. Your father was in the Air Force, which means you spent a lot of time moving around with your family as a child. Born in Florida, moved to Germany when you're 7. How did that family dynamic, your father in the military, all the moves, impact young Valerie?
One, it helped me realize the world was much bigger than what was right around me. I remember when we were still in Florida, I was born at Tyndall Air Force Base in Panama City, and my parents had found out that we were moving. And they told me, I'll never forget them saying, now we had 3 options. They thought they were surprising me with Germany, but they made the mistake of telling me that the 3 options were Syracuse, New York, Honolulu, and Frankfurt, Germany. I was 6 at the time and I had never heard of Germany. And all I could hear was dun 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 dun. We're moving to Hawaii. And I remember the look on their faces like, no, 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 we picked Germany.
You got David Hasselhoff, not Steve McGarrett.
Um, and I didn't know where it was. I didn't know what the people looked like. I had all these ideas, and I remember getting there. I called it the little car country because it was 1980, and
The little car
in
country.
America we still have big cars, and they had little cars. But to go and hear another language and learn, start learning to speak German, and to be in the middle of Western Europe where we could drive easily to places like Amsterdam or Paris
In little cars.
little cars. We got a little car too. It was pretty amazing, and it really shaped me because I majored in international affairs. That's what my bachelor's degree is. I thought I would go on to be an international corporate attorney doing something where I needed to speak German and Spanish regularly. I had a love, a passion for languages. We even had a German exchange student in our home when I was in high school. I studied Spanish. In college, I would take the Spanish language calls for a cable network that I worked for. That was a passion. So that's a big part of how it shaped me. And then just learning to adapt quickly to new environments as well.
That's such a gift right there. The willingness or the ability to adapt. That is such a lost art for some parts of generations that are very comfortable in their space, but suddenly the space changes.
Yeah, my parents were intentional about making the most of these moves. So, for example, when we moved to Germany, we didn't live on the Air Force Base. We lived out on the economy, as they call it. And that was really wonderful, because some would go to Europe, be stationed on a base, and be scared to ever leave the base. Like, because the base is like a little piece of America, but we didn't live on the base. You all live in the same, they look like the houses you draw when you're in kindergarten with just the little roof and straight down, but it's 3 floors. It's basically 3 apartments. And I remember keeping our little German dictionary, no Google back then, talking to our landlords because our landlords were wonderful people, but they didn't speak English. So they'd have their English dictionary, we'd have our German dictionary, but we made it work. That was a wonderful time. I loved Germany, really enjoyed living there, enjoyed the people, loved the mountains, the old castles, places we would visit. It was a lot of fun, and I enjoyed riding on a Mercedes school bus to school because the taxis, the school buses are all Mercedes in Germany.
Yeah, because a Blue Word would be in your future.
Yes.
Yeah. In fact, that is true. Like, by the time you get to middle school, high school, you've moved to Colorado, and as a Smoky Hill Buffalo, you ran track, took part in gymnastics. When I looked at your yearbook, all the things you did, man, I'm trying to figure some club that you weren't a part of.
Oh my goodness.
But you were also on the cheer squad.
Hey, Don, there's nothing like walking out onto floor exercise in a leotard and being introduced as a lady buffalo.
Okay.
Not the best mascot for the gymnasts.
Well, I hadn't quite thought about that, but thank you. But can you share a story from all those interactions in athletics that you still think about today?
Well, I've always loved sports. In fact, at one point before I finished grad school, I thought I would be a sports
But
journalist.
then you found real work and left sports journalism to me. Thank you.
It was just fun. Even in Germany, we used to follow the base team all over Germany. Every Army and Air Force base had a football team back then. And one of my dad's close friends was the head coach. And I learned all the football signals. Like I would read what the referees were doing and convert that for my mom. Here's what he's saying is happening. So, for me, cheerleading was so fun. I was the head captain when I was a junior. And it was a lot of discipline as well. That was the one thing I did the longest. I made the squad in 10th grade. So did basketball, football season, and then even spring cheering on the soccer team was a lot of fun as well. Learned a little bit about soccer. Growing up an only child, cheerleading was the one sports activity I did that was a team sport.
Right.
Track was running by myself, gymnastics was by myself. I needed to learn to be a part of a team. It didn't feel like a challenge to me because I loved being with people, but I remember I think I acted a little much like a military leader when I, I was leading as we were preparing to go to a state competition. And they were like, she's driving us a little too hard. So I remember having to like back off a little bit because I was hyper focused. I'll just say it like that.
You were a little more patent than you should have been.
Didn't even realize it. This little 5'1". Yeah, that was me. So
That's awesome. But as you led and as you tried to pull them together to get them to do really high performance stunts and other things, what were you learning that you would later have to put into play?
in order to prepare to be your best at the main event, there are things you're going to have to do that don't look related, but are important in building your skill set. I don't really enjoy running, but we ran. We did a mile warm up, building endurance. I remember feeling that that wasn't really related, but of course it's related. That's something I learned even with gymnastics. Weightlifting was a big part of our regimen. So understanding the background things that you need to do to build up your stamina to accomplish your goals was really important. Collaboration was another piece. Everything from choosing our music to our routines to who was going to do what stunt was extremely important, and allowing people to feel heard and a part of the process, because when that is the case, everybody's really on board. Everybody's gung ho about what you're doing, as opposed to one or two people making all of the decisions. Obviously, ultimately, you've got to bring it all together, but truly allowing people to feel heard. And then I think it's just the overall management of the visual, the appearance. How do you have everyone appear cohesive? Because ultimately, you've got to be thinking about how does this look to the audience? You can think about how it feels to you, but ultimately you're entertaining the audience, you're helping to get them excited and inspired for the team. Having to step out of your own shoes and think of this from the other perspective really changes sometimes what you choose to do and how you choose to do it. And those are things I use to this day.
Some great applications in what you just talked about. Understanding how what you're doing is seen by others and what impression does it leave on them. Yes, you may feel good about how you have done or prepared, but if it doesn't leave the impression on others that you were hoping, you might have just wasted effort.
Well, Don, so much of what I do always starts with purpose. And the purpose question I ask constantly is, how are others' lives better because they cross paths with you? even way back then, thinking about what is the purpose of the cheerleaders? Why are we really here? Is always an important question. I think for all of us, we want to be asking that question. And we always want to be tapping into our vision, our values, what really matters. How are we wanting to show up? What are we wanting to express? We started out talking a bit about the power of building legacy. That shapes a decision. So if you understand your purpose, it's a compass. It helps to guide the decisions you make.
It's pretty powerful.
It's not just important for deciding what to do, but it's important for energizing you to do it. Because most things that you want to do have inevitable obstacles that show up. And if you haven't tapped into purpose, vision, and values, it becomes a lot easier to give up at some point or to lose your energy or your enthusiasm. But when you're tapping into purpose, vision, and values, you get excited and energized to keep going even when it gets difficult or frustrating.
In some of the work we do with organizations, just as you do, one of the things we talk about is that when you tap into those veins of purpose energy, what you end up creating is a connection to the discretionary energy that a person brings to work. We're all required to do a certain amount of things just to get through the day. We get hired for this job, we have to be here at this time, whatever it is. Those are the required energies that are necessary just to be on the payroll. It's the discretionary energy, and our ability to tap that is where teams really start to flow together doing extraordinary things.
Yeah.
So I'm going to admit, you mentioned that cheerleading was a sport that you were active in. I didn't always think of cheerleading as a sport until my 12-year-old daughter joined her school's cheer team a couple of years ago. And when I look at the bumps and bruises and injuries that she comes back with, my opinion has completely changed.
Yeah, she got a little close up view of what was going on.
I'm going to assume you consider cheer a sport too.
I do, but I even find myself sometimes now, like, slowly saying it, even when I said it at the beginning of the podcast. But there's no question that it is very physical. Like I said, we were running to warm up. I never broke any bones, but we had some broken bones on our cheerleading squad. You're flipping around in the air, actually more physical than other sports, in fact.
My daughter loves to challenge the basketball players to come on over and try to do some of the things that they do. And again, it's very team oriented. One person doesn't do what's required, somebody falls and gets hurt.
Oh, yes.
So now moving and the ability to adapt became a continued part of your life. Out of high school, you accept an appointment to the Air Force Academy. Then you move to Monterey, California. Then you come to my town of Tallahassee. Go Knowles, go Rattlers. You earned a couple of degrees. Then Dallas after grad school. And today you live in Georgia.
Yes, and there was a 6-year stop in the DC area where I lived in Maryland, so I moved to Atlanta from Annapolis.
So, as we talked about earlier briefly, that idea of the ability to adapt and embrace change, not to wish for what it used to be, not to moan about how great things were back in the day, but just to adapt and embrace those opportunities for change. So important in leadership development and in training. How today can you help all the rest of us think about change through your life's experiences?
Don, I've thought about this a lot, particularly over the last year or so. We just passed 4 years in our home, and it occurred to me how many addresses I've had in my life. I actually moved more after high school than before. Really, we only lived in three places. My father had a quick 1 year stint in South Korea when I was in high school and came back to Denver to the same base. It's unusual, but he was an accountant in the Air Force, so he wasn't assigned. We didn't move every 3 years. He got an assignment every 3 years, but we got to stay places a long time. And we passed the 4 year mark living in our home. And I realized at the 3 year mark, I was getting kind of antsy. Like, this has been great. It's been a great adventure. What's what's coming up next? So I think we can get into a habit, a rhythm. And whether that has been you being in one place, whether it's work or where you live, etc., for a really long time and you're resistant to ever changing, or you're someone who you move along a lot, sometimes you need to stop and pause and say, what's the message for me right now? Stretching and growing might mean doing something different, or stretching and growing might mean staying put and learning to settle somewhere. That's where I am. So I am committed to get to the 5 year mark. I have never lived at one address for 5 years. Four and a half is my record, and that record ended in 1988 when we moved in 88. So here's how I look at it. You have seasons in your life, and it's really important to note when a season has ended. Appreciate the season. Ask yourself, what was the lesson for me in this season? What was the opportunity for me? What was the blessing in this for me? And then to look ahead to new seasons with an anticipation that there are new lessons. I really like to see life as an adventure. When I think of it as seasons, and I think this is true for all of us, it becomes a lot easier to let go of what was and move into your new season. It's also a sign that sometimes we're still trying to hold on to an old season that's gone. We are trying to keep doing things the way that it was appropriate in the old season. And it's like, we've got something new going on. So that's what it was. Now let me look forward, because what can happen is we stare at the closed door of what was, and we don't turn around and face forward to notice what new doors are opening.
Ooh, I love that.
Yes, I think that's a big piece of what I have learned that is really powerful. We can appreciate what we had and anticipate what's coming, even when we think what's coming is not what we planned, what we wanted, etc. It is what it is.
How can you help those of us who might be in where we've been in a role for a bit feel like what we're doing is fresh? Any exercise, or is there a process that you recommend for people that are trying to make sure that they're seeing what we've just been through, as you said, as a season, and that good is all around and ahead?
So, pausing to intentionally ask the question, what wisdom am I taking from this season I was just in? What lessons will I carry with me into the new season? And how do I want to apply those lessons? That's tremendous. So, we don't have to repeat lessons that perhaps would not be very fun to repeat. Also, so that we're growing into the new season. But as you're facing a new season, particularly when it's challenging, I'm a coach, so I'm always asking those questions because I believe when you ask the right questions, you get the right answers.
Right.
So, asking what is the opportunity in this challenge? Or if it's not a big challenge, what's the opportunity for me in this season? That's what I did for myself when I started having that itch to, to move, to do something else. What would be the opportunity in staying put? And I thought, well, there are things that I would do that I wouldn't otherwise do. There are investments we making our home exactly what we have dreamed for it to be. There are opportunities to experience what it feels like to not be on the move constantly. Those might seem small to someone else, but for someone like me, it's brought a sense of calm and of peace that I haven't had before because I'm not thinking about what's next.
Right.
I'm focused on maximizing what is and thinking about what that feels like years down the road to have a place. This is where I am. It's a mental shift that's actually very nurturing for me.
I love it. I know you started your career out of college basically in public relations,
Mhm.
but you had a major career change when there was an epiphany at a Barnes and Noble store in Seattle. Tell me about the Barnes and Noble epiphany.
Yes, I was actually at a journalism convention, the Unity Convention. It was several different journalism associations together that year. And I had known I wanted to write books. I got a master's degree in journalism, but I went into public relations. So writing's always been something that I loved. There was a panel discussion that last day. I stayed to hear it of journalists who had written books. I love books, always loved books. And so there was a woman I saw, she was on the panel, Sabrina Gandy, and I just kind of saw myself in her. And I walked across the street to the Barnes and Nobles, directly across the street from the convention center. And I was standing there looking at some books. And then I just had this epiphany. Your mission is inspiring others to live more fulfilling lives. You'll do it through writing and speaking. I cannot explain. It wasn't in an audible voice, but I heard it loud and clear. I felt like I was going to float away. Like I was so excited. And there was no one with me. I wanted to tell somebody, but I didn't figure any of the other customers would get what I was having this major life epiphany.
You don't want to go over to the coffee counter and say, "Excuse me, but let me tell you."
You're going to have some of my books in here soon. But it fit immediately when I heard it. It was like, yes, that's exactly what I'm supposed to be doing. I remember going back to my hotel room, writing it down so I wouldn't forget. And within about 3 weeks, I started writing my first book. I tried writing on the computer, Don, but I kept trying to figure out how many words I had written, and that wasn't working. I kept doing a word count.
That's a disaster.
Yeah, so I wrote my first book all on legal notepads. I still have all the legal
Oh
notepads.
my gosh.
And then we typed it up and edited it from there. I cannot imagine doing that now because I cannot write as fast as my thoughts come, but times have changed a lot.
Yes.
It was my 3rd attempt actually to write a book. The difference this time was I had my purpose, inspiring others to live more fulfilling lives. I was also a little older. I was a whopping 26 at the time.
Oh, you're a veteran.
So I'd had a little more wisdom, and, I wrote it in about 2.5 months,
Wow.
and I had a goal of getting a big publisher, but I didn't wanna wait for someone to tell me it was good enough. I knew I had something to say that was gonna help someone, so I self-published it. I bought a book about how to self-publish, being in PR. I shared it with my media friends, and within that 1st month, there was a nice big feature in the Dallas Morning News. I was on all the local network affiliates, and then I had sent the self-published book to the small press department in Barnes& and Barnes& and Noble picked up the self-published book. Then the following year at a big book expo, I met an editor from Random House, and they bought the rights to that book and released their version of it in '01. So that was my writing journey of becoming an author, and now I'm working on book number 14.
Oh my gosh, that's so great. Out of that though, writing led you to create what's turned into a really incredible company, Inspire Inc. Now you're working to develop coaches who will help others grow. So you took the exponential model. I don't want to just coach, I want to coach coaches. And because of your success in coaching, you've developed a whole set of principles that you teach others. Is there a principle, an idea that you might share with us that would help us be better as a result of listening to you today?
Well, the first is something I already shared, which is it is critical that you know your purpose. What are you here for? But I also think there's a principle I learned that is so very important. And I think I may first have really learned this from John Maxwell, the importance of personal growth. How far you go is really determined by how much you grow. So, one of the things that we teach at the Coaching and Positive Psychology Institute is that often, yes, we are helping people with their goals, but we tend to focus on goals of performance. How do I get that promotion, build my business, increase my income, lose 20 pounds, all of those kinds of things, get the relationship I really, really want. What we don't understand is the reason oftentimes we don't have those things yet is because there's a growth gap. There is a way that we need to grow that will enable us, that will empower us to that goal. So it may be that it's an area of communication in your relationships and you need to grow in that area. If it's financial, it may be that an insecurity or lack of negotiation because of your fear of what other people think is keeping you from asking for what you are worth or negotiating better deals on things. So, being able to make the connection when you set a goal, how will I need to grow in order to go to the place I'm wanting to go? Because it's not enough to know what steps to take. Generally speaking, with most goals, we know what steps to take. Just take weight loss. Basically, I don't care what plan someone gives you, it's either eat healthier or move more, or a combination of the two. The question is, why aren't you eating healthier? Why aren't you moving more? Right? What happens when it's time to exercise? What happens when it's time to make that choice that would be healthier? That's that area of growth. That is being aware of your thoughts and how can you change those. So just asking yourself, what is my growth gap? Where do I need to grow? in order to get to my most meaningful goal.
What is my growth gap? I love that. You often ask aspiring leaders, do you have the soft skills to get ahead at work? Can we break that down for our listeners?
Absolutely. So much of what I talk about is around resilience. That is my specialty. Oftentimes, we focus a lot on the technical skills, but if you're leading people, building the psychological capital of your team and of your company is essential. Especially when we look back over this last couple of years, we've all been resilient. I mean, there's different levels of resilience, but no matter what, even if you didn't want to be resilient, if you're still here at this point, you are resilient.
Yeah.
So we want to be paying attention as we are leading other people to whether or not we are creating an environment that empowers resilience, which means, are we paying attention to responses, to the needs to pivot, to change, to do things differently? Are people getting what they need in terms of relationships and collaboration? So, for example, on teams, we know that teams start to break down when the ratio of positive interactions to negative ones goes below 3 to 1. What does that mean? You better catch your people doing things right and tell them when they're doing things right. You should be celebrating wins in your meetings. I always say it's great to start a meeting, any conversation with a win or a grin. We have any wins or grins this week? Talk about what we've accomplished. What's the win or what's the grin? It might just be something funny that happened, something that made you smile. What does that do? It builds positive emotion. And positive emotion actually expands your capacity to deal with adversity and with stress. So, a leader's attitude and positive emotion is more contagious to the rest of the team than if we're just talking about peers. That's an extra level of responsibility. Your ability to be resilient, to handle setbacks in a way that reflects what you want the rest of the team to be doing in the face of their setbacks is really important because they are learning from you. So, starting from this positive place, looking for the good, not ignoring the obstacles and the challenges, but actually having an optimistic thinking style, meaning you have accurate thinking, you see the problems, but you have an optimistic attitude that we can work around or work through them or tweak the goal in such a way that we still get to our main objective. Those things are super important. And oftentimes, we're not thinking specifically around resilience and building that psychological capital and what our individual role is in that. And you really can start with just finding the positive, celebrating what's being done right, celebrating that great customer service that you saw, or the person who really pushed through and persevered, because that celebration says, hey, this is what we value. And other people recognize this is what we celebrate. I want to do some of that too.
I love the idea of that optimistic thinking style and actually building that in because in a world in which things are tough, critical thinking style comes up very easily. Everybody's always in a, oh man, I wish we had, or boy, an optimistic thinking style that would come off to some as a soft skill. But the truth is, you've given numbers 3 to 1 ratio that below that, the team falls apart. So extraordinary value in that. Thank you. You know, we opened by talking about this Maxwell opportunity and how exciting it is. And as I understand your new role with the league, with you and your cape, you're going to continue your efforts with coaching and helping to bring out other people's potential and achieve success. Tell us, how will that be part of what this new relationship is going to play out? How will we see Valerie Burton?
Well, for one, bringing my background in positive psychology and coaching, I think, is a big piece because leaders need to be great coaches and they need to be coached, meaning they need to be teachable. But also, I think you're going to see some more talk around this resilience topic and bringing that to organizations and coaching as a leadership skill because it is. So much of what leaders do in leading is leading those teams, having those conversations, those meetings that keep everyone focused. But so often we're focused on just having the answers. Really good leaders are great at not just having answers, but starting with the question. Imagine starting your meetings with questions. What should we be asking right now?
Mm.
What options haven't we considered? Think about brainstorming from that perspective when you use a coaching approach with leadership. So I'm really excited about the new opportunities, the new training, the new coaching approach that I'm able to contribute as a part of this League of Extraordinary Leaders.
I love that idea of coaching through questions.
Yeah.
When we look at the different kinds of leaders, we think of command and control, Valerie as captain of the cheerleading team. You do this.
I said it more nicely than that, Don. I did. I did.
I'm seeing you as, a young power leader right there. No, but the idea there that you were able to grow and understand that what it takes is we have to bring people along by asking them, learning where they are, and then trying to figure out how we help people get where they are.
Yes.
At the end of each of our podcasts, we do a quick little corporate competition. It's a this or that question. I want to know, are you ready?
I'm ready.
Okay. Big city, small town.
In between.
Oh.
Small town. It's small town now. It's small town. I got the big city out of my system. Okay.
Okay.
Actually, Don, I'm so complicated. It's small town near a big city.
Oh my gosh. Now I'm starting to scare.
Yeah, you should be scared.
One of the ones that I had on here was convertible or pickup truck, but I'm afraid of what you might develop out of that. Like a pickup truck that has a top that comes down or something. I'm not sure.
Oh my goodness. Yes.
But go ahead. Convertible pickup truck.
Definitely convertible. My husband has the pickup truck.
Coke or Pepsi?
I live in Atlanta. Coke.
You never know. You might want to be the contrarian in the room. Who knows? Pancakes or waffles? Just got to know.
Pancakes.
Pancakes
with Vermont maple syrup.
With Vermont maple syrup. You got it. Valerie Burton, I'm getting to know you already, but the idea that in the future, I'll be there just learning from you, soaking it up, because already you've inspired me through my need to ask better questions. I'm going to keep working on it. But more importantly, I just thank you for your time and the willingness you've offered to share your wisdom with us here as part of being a corporate competitor.
Oh, Don, thank you. This has been so much fun.
Wow. What a great conversation with Valerie. Looking back at my notes, a few things stood out. One, I loved that question. She said, ask yourself, because this develops your purpose, how are the lives of others better because they crossed paths with you? She truly felt like a coach in this interview. She was asking questions that made me pause, questions that I'm going to have to go back and listen to again. But they were questions that are so good, we're going to put them together in a downloadable resource and add them to your show notes. I loved her whole idea about seeing life as an adventure and understanding that that allows you to appreciate the season you're in and the season that's ahead. And when you see it that way, becomes easier to move on from certain situations as opposed to getting stuck in a rut. What happened was just a season. Now we can move on. And then finally, boy, she really got me when she talked about coaching, leading through questions and asking, what is my growth gap? The questions she was asking me to ask myself will make me a better leader. Having an optimistic thinking style, having that ratio of 3-to-1 in the interaction I have with my team, making sure the positive interactions outweigh the negative interactions by at least that number, because anything below that tears at the very fabric of the team you really want to build. To do that, you have to catch your people doing things right. What a great encouragement that is for me as a leader and for you. I hope that what we covered today gives you work that you can go do, the questions you can go ask, and the growth that will make all of us better. If you could share one habit, one thing you've done consistently that allowed you to separate yourself from your competitors, what would it be? In my 30-year career, 2,500 of the greatest athletes, coaches, and leaders answered that question for me.
This is Don Yeager, who did that that article I was telling you about.
Don, Dave Sims with Coach K. How you doing?
Hey, Don. How you doing, my man? Great, sir.
What they gave to me is what I'm giving to you in my online course, Journey to Greatness. Through engaging storytelling and on-demand videos, you will learn the 16 habits that will jumpstart your personal growth. I will instruct you on how to apply these winning characteristics to your life through custom workbook exercises. We are slashing the price for our podcast listeners. Lifetime access to Journey to Greatness is normally $399, but for our podcast listeners, it will be $49 with the code podcast at checkout. Click the banner on corporatecompetitorpodcast.com to enroll. Thanks for listening to the show. I would be so grateful if you left us a rating and a review. We will be rolling out a new episode every Wednesday. To be the first to listen, subscribe to the podcast on our website, corporatecompetitorpodcast.com. Plus, as a thank you gift, you will receive a free chapter from one of my best-selling books on the habits of high-performing teams. Stay in touch by connecting with me on social media at Don Yeager, Yaeger, on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. Until next week, I appreciate you.